Hi, my name is Matthew Bellisario. Welcome to another edition of the BellisarioSonic YouTube channel. Today, another episode of Pivotal Artists, Pivotal Albums, and today it's going to be about Elvis Presley. So this one is an episode I've been wanting to make because Elvis was one of the first musicians or performers, more aptly said for Elvis, that I really got into at a young age, grade school and into my junior high years. And I was really into Elvis. And I remember when CDs came out, I got the Elvis greatest hits that I wanted. And the Elvis has a very unique influence on me with those early recordings for Sun Records between 53 and 55. And then also with those early RCA recordings. Those to me are the most important and the most lasting influence because that is really the core, the beginning of rock music. Now, when I look at Elvis, there are some positive things about Elvis that he started, this whole iconic rock star image. He was really the first one to really become a rock star, if you think about it. There was nobody that really garnered that kind of attention on that level. Of course, there were other popular singers and so forth before him, but he really came onto the stage when RCA picked him up. He had a hit record with Sun Records, That's All Right, 1954, but he only lasted for a couple of years at Sun Records before RCA in November 20th, 1955, they pick him up and he would be an RCA recording artist from then on out until his death in 1977. I remember the day he died, so I'm going to talk about that before I get into the controversial part of Elvis. But I do remember August 16th, 1977, because we were camping. And I remember my mom and my aunt just crying when it was announced over the radio. We had the radio on. And we were out camping in the park, and all of a sudden my mom and my aunt are just crying. And I remember my uncle and my stepdad, kind of shaking their heads. Because Elvis just died. And so that was a huge deal for them. They loved Elvis. And that brings me to this whole idea of the rock star, this whole idea of the icon before the music. And Elvis really, although he didn't start out that way, he eventually, his iconic stature as a performer would overshadow anything musical, unfortunately. And I think that that's carried on to this day. And I'm going to talk about that because I think that's the negative part about Elvis. He was never a great musician, was never a great guitar player or a great piano player. He was, however, able to do what was needed in order for him to be successful playing this rhythm and blues, rockabilly music that he brought forth at the Sun Records sessions, which he would bring all these African-American influences to the forefront to a wider audience. Very important. And the music, I love those Sun recordings. So I want to talk about that because one of the iconic albums, this is an 83 release of the Louisiana Hayride live recordings that I love listening to. And even though the recordings aren't that great sounding, you've got all those great hits of That's All Right Mama, Blue Moon of Kentucky, Good Rockin' Tonight, I Got a Woman, Maybelline, Chuck Berry song, That's All Right Mama, Hound Dog. So you've got these live recordings, and I always loved listening to this album. So those Sun records would be very important. But the problem with Elvis, especially in the later years, which I'm not, those aren't my favorite years. I like some of the live recordings that you get in the 60s, the late 60s. Once he got into the 70s, things started going downhill, in my opinion, although he was always surrounded by great musicians. But going back to Elvis as a musician, when we look at his guitar playing, let's go back to the Sun sessions. He's playing with Scotty Moore, Bill Black on bass, and DJ Fontana on drums. And you've got this small group, and all Elvis has to do is keep the rhythm with the acoustic guitar. And so as far as musicianship went, wasn't that critical to be a great guitar player. And so he was able to do what he needed to do to make that happen. And of course, once he moves in with RCA, he's going to be surrounded, with great musicians. and going into the army would kind of put a stop to that musical process. And I think that's really what killed Elvis, in a sense, was going into the army. That was kind of a demarcation point for me. He had those hits in the early RCA days, and then ends up in the army. And when he comes back, he's set up to go into the movies, and therefore the music suffered, and the iconic part came to the forefront. And that's what I think was a detriment. And what lasts today negatively in the music industry is making an icon first and worrying about music second. You can see that with Taylor Swift. They created an icon. They did a great job at marketing her. Her music, I've gone and listened to a lot of her songs just to try to see musically what what's the big deal about the music. And a lot of times, even if I'm not into some type of music, pop music, I can obviously hear a good hook. If you go listen to Madonna as a pop artist, I'm not a huge Madonna fan, but there are a lot of catchy songs and a lot of hooks, and you can see why people would be attracted to her music, especially young women or whatever that would get into that kind of music. But when I listen to Taylor Swift, I don't hear a lot of hooks. I don't hear anything that's very unique, very that would just immediately catch you, or even keep your attention. And then of course the iconic status. Of course, she's fairly decent looking. Elvis, of course, that was never hurt him. And obviously having that stage presence got all the young women excited. So it became that iconic part really just got away and became more important than the music, unfortunately. Let me continue though, talking about some of the pivotal albums, because there are some great albums, like even this gold records. You've got all these early RCA hits: Hound Dog, All Shook Up, Heartbreak Hotel, Jailhouse Rock, Don't Be Cruel, Love Me Tender. And so you've got a lot of great early hits with RCA. So that's a really pivotal album for me. As far as live material goes, I always liked the comeback special. I always like this record here, even though it's kind of a lot of medleys, but it's kind of Elvis getting back to his roots, so to speak. After doing all these movies, he had not focused on music quite as much as what he would like to have done. And of course, this was supposed to be kind of a saccharine Christmas special, and Elvis kind of just turned it into this rock performance with this iconic, of course, performance of If I Can Dream. So I do like this album a lot. As far as later things go, the Elvis at in person at the International Hotel. Of course, I think he played like around 6 years there, and this was a pretty good recording of some of those performances. So I do like this album quite a bit. And then I think Aloha from Hawaii is pretty cool to listen to, and pretty interesting in the history of rock music, because it's the first time you had any kind of concert that was broadcast around the world. And of course, now with the internet, that's not such a big feat, right? We don't really give that much consideration. But when you go back to when this was recorded in 1973, that was a huge deal. So this is a pretty fun record to listen to. I think it's Elvis really at the end of what I consider to be a fruitful career. And from then, the last 4 years, not the best performances by Elvis. Even though he went out and I think he really went out and gave it his all of what he was able to do. But I think the drugs and the bad health and everything just started taking a big toll on him. So for me, I got into him in the junior high, and I was a huge Elvis fan, and I listened to all those early recordings and was really into that. And it still sticks with me to this day, because when we go out and play acoustic trio, I still play Elvis songs like That's All Right Mama and Blue Moon of Kentucky. And so that Elvis is really important as far as that beginning of rock music and that rockabilly, that attitude, that new stage presence. And the stage presence, I think, is still very important for a performer to perform well on stage and engage the audience. And Elvis did love the audience, and people came up to see him until the end. He'd still sell out places. And so there's for me, it's a double-edged sword with Elvis. The music, was very important. The first recordings of Elvis with RCA and the Sun Records were very important. I love all those recordings. And as time went on, things to me just began to slide. And got into some of the country recordings. Some of those are good, some of them not so good, in my opinion. And again, Elvis could play piano, he could play guitar, but he wasn't stellar at playing. He wasn't just a stellar musician. I think he was a clever arranger for arranging things live. And again, he had great live bands that backed him. And so I think he's a very important figure. He still is to me. I still like listening to a lot of those early Elvis recordings. But for me, it's also that double-edged sword of the icon being more important than the music. And I think, unfortunately, when RCA made all this money from Elvis, and that was a signal to them that they could do this with other people, that they could take somebody and make them an Elvis or an Elvisette, or you know what I'm saying, a female version of it. And so nowadays in music, that is what it's about. With popular music anymore, it's not really about the talent. And I'm not saying that Taylor Swift isn't talented, can't sing. I think that a lot of these artists are talented to a point, but the music to me, is what suffers. Elvis had a lot of good music, a lot of good songwriters to pick from or to have people write for him. And so that was very different element than what you have now. Yes, you have people writing songs for these new artists, but they're not very good songwriters, in my opinion. Again, this is my opinion, because I go and I listen to a lot of modern music, and there is a lot of good modern music out nowadays. But these most popular ones nowadays, it's all about the looks and the iconic image and getting up on the stage and being half dressed. And that's the whole core point of it. And the fact that you can still sell records or sell out arenas or what have you, that's what they're looking to do, no matter what the music is. So whatever they can get by with the music, as long as it's something you can go out and move to and show off your body or whatever it is, now you can sell records. And unfortunately, Elvis was the start of that type of thinking, whether or not he even thought of it like that. And I'm sure at the beginning he really didn't think too much about it. He just kind of did what he felt. And I'm sure later on, as the years went by, that Colonel Tom Parker especially was like, this is an image we have to sell. And of course, Elvis is going to go along with it because there's a lot of money to be made. And so I think that's what happens nowadays too. You've got these people who are managers for these big record companies. They've got this person that they've created, this persona, this image that they can sell. And of course, the person that's doing it, if they just like going out and being famous and making millions of dollars, you think they're going to complain? No. Hey, create an image for me. I'll do it. Anyways, and of course, we have crappy music on the radio now as a result. It's all about the image. But I do think that's also going to suffer here very soon. That's another video to where I think there'll always be room for stars, always be room for these iconic figures, but it's getting less and less so. Anyways, that's all I got today about Elvis. Very influential artist in my life, just getting me into that rock and roll and back to that roots in the rhythm and blues. And then of course I would go back and later on realize who these people were that influenced Elvis, all these blues guys and so on and so forth. So as far as something to get into Elvis with, this is a great place to start, because this is all the recordings of Elvis between 53 and 55. And so I would definitely recommend picking this up if you just want to get one thing by Elvis. You got 3 discs on here. If you don't like a lot of outtakes and things like that, you might want to just look for a Sun Records album or CD and get all just the basic Sun Records. I think there were like 24 songs recorded in full for Sun Records. And so you can go out and get those just and listen to those. But that would be my recommendation. This is a great box set here. So that's all I got today, folks. We'll talk to you later on another episode. Take care.